the other night, well then, why did we write the books? Were they just for us? And the answer to that is no. And I thought we had made that clear. We said that's true. It has a lot to do with it being for you. But why was the age of Jesus? Why was the information that followed to Jesus? Why were the Gospels written? Why did Jesus teach them what he taught them? Even though while he was teaching them, it was probably to them. Well, let me say this: as you look at in the New Testament and in Jesus' teachings with his disciples, you can see that their lingo and their understanding of things like demons and healing and all was a different translation than what we understand it to be today. For example, let's say that disciples went into a house and they did as Jesus had told them to do when they were out preaching. And then they come back to Jesus and they said, oh, it was really super. We were over in such and such a town, and while we were there, we were able to cast out demons and heal the sick and all kinds of other things. And yet, that was their lingo. And yet, if you remember at times, you could think of it, or no, don't know how to start this. Let's say that in that time, when someone had a very ugly attitude or something, they said he had a bad spirit or he had a demon. And or if he had a negative attitude, he was a crank, he was a miserable person in the family, and he just made trouble for everybody. Yes, and so temperamental, and they said, well, he had a demon. But when they were present, when the disciples were present in that house, saying that they were actually with the one that the world had been looking for years. They knew him personally, and they represented him, and he was the Messiah they were looking for, and his name is Jesus, and I can tell you what he has taught me. Would not people listen so as to not be concerned with their temperament or their ailments? And the same thing happened to you when you went out and you were telling people what you had learned, and that there were some here from the next level, and that you were going to go to the next level. Why, some that would have otherwise certainly, and back in Jesus' time, been labeled as having demons or labeled as being sick. For the time you were talking to them, they weren't sick, and they had no demons, because nothing had come their way that took their attention and did them more good if they were positive. And most of the people that you would visit with, in a circumstance, because this was in houses that accepted. In other words, they were positive people. They were thirsty people. And they weren't to stay in a house where they didn't accept it. And this is the experiences they had in houses where people accepted them. Now, if you were out on your track around the United States holding meetings, and you stayed places or you talked to people where they really wanted to know, and they were really listening, the same characteristics happened to them as happened to those in that day and time. It's just different terminology, different lingo. Can you understand that? Diseases were rampant that didn't even exist except psychosomatically, too, in that day and time. And I'm afraid it's true today, the same thing, but maybe not quite as bad as it was then. But the point is, going back to what you brought up, the reason the gospel writers left their record the reason Jesus came and taught those that he was teaching, or part of the reason, was to bring in the New Age. Now, what purpose did the New Age serve? It served a tremendous assistance to you all and to awaken your teachers and to prepare people should they be looking for us. Now, when we say people, we're talking about computers. We're talking about plants. It's like if they read a book, and if they read it with interest and with an open mind, they're being programmed so that their vehicles are more receptive to the information. And if the vehicles have accepted it, then it also makes the period more prepared for the next stage. I mean, someone asked the other day about what was the Lord doing with Moses and those people there. And it was primarily programming those vehicles respect for the kingdom of God, fear of the kingdom of God. And he spent a long time trying to program vehicles. But the ones that accepted the programming, it went on down for generations in their genetic structure. That program doesn't have to be conscious. It comes out in their actions. They don't have to know that information consciously. So the books that you leave are not only assistance to your own development, but they program vehicles, plants, and they prepare. They do a beautiful preparation for a next time that the kingdom of heaven would come for some association with people, or with bringing students. You follow that?
So the New Age would be like an age of pure vehicles for future students' use. Would that be real significant?
Well, you all, do you remember what we said, that the next level comes in and helps the balance of the computers? It plants into their computers a certain amount of goodness, because there's more than enough badness that is planted by Lucifer and his forces on this planet. And the New Age literature plants goodness in the computers. The presence of members of the next level with the class does a tremendous planting of goodness in those vehicles. Now, there's going to come a time when either the slate is going to be cleaned of this garden, or the Lucifer force is going to be eradicated, and these vehicles are going to go in reverse. The plants on the planet will go in reverse metamorphosis from what Adam went through in falling. In other words, the vehicles could be restored because they could be of more use to the next level in many, many, many ways if they were changed back to what they could be, having gone from animal to non-animal, to the condition Adam was in before he fell. And all the plants are capable of that reverse action. And if you start feeding them the information in your books, in their computers, and shock their minds once again, because the lower forces have come in and wiped out all the shocking information that's in the Bible. But you're saying it again, that you don't have to exist on sex. You don't have. Your books are saying that you don't have to treat people the way or be motivated on the things that this world motivates you on. You're teaching them the lessons and the instructions and all that you experienced. And that could prepare the human race, all those plants, for a transition toward being pure again.
You've got to remember that this garden belongs to the next level, and the Lucifer force is only using it. And even though Lucifer has gone into the different vehicles to to reproduce more vehicles, and there are a lot of vehicles that are in a fallen state, like we mentioned the other day. It doesn't mean that the next level cannot step in and do something with those vehicles. And we're not talking about taking them to the next level. We're not talking about that, but they can use those vehicles.
Yes, it's just like they used Adams. They could use the plant and put a mind in it and place it on another garden in the same condition Adam was when he arrived in the Garden of Eden. Can't you see that? But he was in a pure state, but he was in the reverse animal state.
Even though Lucifer thinks that all of this is his, it can be taken away from him whenever the next level decides to.
Yes, he tries to run it as his, but he also knows very well that the next level comes in periodically and brings things back to keep them from being out of control. In other words, the next level can't have a class go through here without making certain adjustments from time to time that make the computers that your minds occupy a useful tool, something that you can accomplish what you need to accomplish. If the next level didn't come in and check those balances occasionally and take humans aboard spacecrafts, check them out, and then go change atmosphere here and change conduct there and do all the little games that they do in order to make balance, you wouldn't be able to overcome the forces of this planet when you're on a lesson like you're on. Well, I thought this was clear, so I'm glad you brought it up because maybe it wasn't clear.
We mentioned on the tape at the very beginning, or maybe partly way through, I don't know, but we said to listen to the tape over and over and over again as often as you can so that you can fully understand what we're saying. And we know that the time element hasn't allowed you to listen to it very often, but do it as often as you can simply because it is important. There's a lot of knowledge in there that you cannot grasp at the first time that you hear it. And it's obvious because already the last group were up, I think when the last group was here, they asked questions that were on the tape.
Right.
And but of course we know that they did not have time to listen to it from one time. So
let me ask a question and see if they can answer it. Who can tell us when someone's when a hypnotist takes you in a trance or puts someone in a trance and does life regressions, goes back to previous lives, what's actually going on? Well, it is. It's actually tuning into the genetic information that is in that computer.
Come up through the different vehicles.
That's right. If the vehicle is in good shape, and the person who's doing the hypnosis knows what he's doing, he could actually tune into many minute things and go down a maze of crossroads that preceded that particular vehicle to make it genetically what it is.
Right, it's a genetic thing. You understand.
It's not conscious tapes in the brain.
It's like you talk about a cell, each having its own little brain. And as chromosomes and genes in there have that information.
That's right. And it's even clarified in the brain. That information is even clarified in the brain. In other words, it can be tapped very quickly from the brain. Now, the particular lifetime that the hypnotist, let's say that he's regressing you to 5 years old, if you're really a good subject and he's a good hypnotist, he can actually tune back to the tapes that were playing when you were 5 years old, and you would actually conduct yourself as you were at 5 years old.
I think what they would do mostly would be inhibit the vehicle to perform any better than a 5-year-old could do. There's no way to prove.
Because it's you. See, it's actually you. So what you're doing is blocking out everything past 5 years old when you go back to that. Can you see what he's saying?
On television, on the news, I believe yesterday, I think it was news. Did y'all hear the news yesterday evening where they had, they regressed these 5 individuals, hypnotized them, and then gave the suggestion that they were going back to the age of 5 years of age. And so then he awakened them, and he took one at a time and asked them to write their name on the board. And prior to that, they had written their name the way they normally do. So they got up there and wrote it. And one girl, I believe, wrote it as a 5-year-old would do. I don't know if, in
You
other
can
words,
also tell who was
I
faking
didn't
it.
trust. It was all fake.
You could tell who was faking it because they weren't really under the spell of hypnosis enough.
You could see them try to, well, a
Act as a
5-year-old,
5-year-old.
back when they were 5 years old probably could not write their name. You know what I'm saying? Which is one thing that a very brilliant 5-year-old could write their name.
Right.
Nowadays, they could.
And they drew pictures, and the same one drew a picture that a 5-year-old would have drawn, and the others were faking it. You could tell that they really weren't under hypnosis enough to be doing what they were asked to do accurately. Now, but let's say that the point is that the hypnotist takes you back to years that you couldn't possibly consciously remember. But you can still, if you are a good subject and you're really under hypnosis, and it's a good hypnotist, you would demonstrate whatever you could demonstrate at that time. And certainly, if they can take you beyond your memory, then they can take you even beyond that vehicle. Can you, because it has even been passed through the, well, I don't know how to explain it, except it's like crossroads in a tree, going backwards genetically. But this
I'll
is
tell you what I think.
Okay.
If you'd like to know what
I want to know.
I think that people make it up according to the knowledge that they have learned in their genes. It's just like, suppose they lived back in the days of Cleopatra. And there have been so many Cleopatras who have been regressed. And I believe that Cleopatra stands out in their mind, and so the mind has it can, under hypnosis, it can produce anything. It has a magnificent imagination.
Exaggeration.
And exaggeration, and if it's a good mind, it can even think in detail and pick up on languages and things like that. And I just feel like it's
the point he's making isn't accurate.
There's no way to prove
It's
it.
just
No way to prove it. Even if you can quote names, and they go back and check names, it still doesn't discount the fact that it's in your mind, or in your genes, or whatever. I do believe that the vehicle has a lot of abilities, but I do not believe that there's a way to prove this age regression
with accuracy.
with accuracy.
Because too many come up being the same person. You know, and you know that they're just tuning into some little contact through their computer's memory, and then that contact they're translating the best they can. And like T said, if what they're tuning into came out, stood out in their memory of Caesar's time, then that imagination and ego goes to work and says, "What been Julius Caesar?" You know, 4,000 other Julius Caesars.
In some of the cases where the child, as it starts to be able to talk, insisted it was another child that had died, or the priest could that little vehicle that picked up on some kind of a platform that maybe when the woman died, maybe she left a strong thought of wanting to keep on cooking for her husband, I think.
Okay, well, all right, I'll give you what I think. I think that is a powerful suggestion. In other words, the child probably said something and somebody filled in the blanks. And before you know it, they had a good story. I don't believe half of what I read. And even though they say it's
Because we've seen that thing happen too much. We have seen parents who like to fill in the blanks and like to have the attention of a story of things like that when it just wasn't there.
And the writer in particular, who is writing the books, can always make it a little bit more interesting. It's hard to believe that if you all could, you all know how little truth was written about what we talked about. And we even, people would even sit right in front of us, writing down or even taping it on the tape recorder, and still they couldn't put it down the way they wanted it in their, the way they had recorded it in their mind. Or they wanted it to make it more interesting so they could sell their papers or their books, whatever it is that they were writing. Now, the forces of this garden are the worst I've ever seen with, as far as deception goes, as far as imagination goes, as far as twisting things to make it sound like something else. And I have read those kind of books and felt convinced that they actually happened, but after thinking about it, it just didn't fit.
There's only one way it could have happened, and that would be if Lucifer or one of his helpers wanted to make a spotlight of the case, because he likes to convince you of reincarnation on this planet because it's a copy. This is a copycat planet, and Lucifer and Lucifer or one of his helpers could have done such a trick by going from one and then going into or influencing the mind of the child.
I read where a child, 7-year-old child, this was some time ago, they thought he was the reincarnation of Kennedy. So much so that he could say things about Jacqueline Kennedy, some of the habits that nobody knew about. And but they hushed it all up. I don't know where I read it, but in my mind, the child was just up from the animal kingdom, so much so that he had a strong psychic. I don't mean that from the animal kingdom, that's old lingo. Better change.
Yes.
Okay, let's say that the child was very psychic, or he had a booger that was working in him and trying to spotlight that child for some reason or other, and he could feed this information to it.
Well, you certainly had a significant booger working with Kennedy, right? Because he was in a significant position. There was also a significant working with Jackie, right? So why wouldn't they want to play games with some others in order to make you believe things like
on
this?
headlines of these Inquirers and these other tabloids, they talk about Elvis Presley talking to his somebody, you know, and who else has just died recently? Where Peter Sellers, I think, has contacted somebody now, you know. And all they're trying to do is get attention. And someplace, look at what happened to Elvis Presley. He was more popular after he died than while he was alive, because he was a has-been while he was alive, right? Because he had already lost his popularity.
He really was a has-been. He had really died on the line, except for a very small little fan club. But suddenly everybody was his fan club.
And so after Peter Sellers died, they wanted to see, well, maybe we can make him as great as so-and-so over here made Elvis. And it is hard to believe us when we talk about this, because it goes against what you have been programmed to know, and even against what I knew in this country.
Me too.
I mean, I'm talking things that I did not know until I began to awaken.
Well,
it's all a bunch of games.
We knew that Lucifer and his helpers spent time using prominent individuals. In other words, they made them prominent in order to use them for certain things. And why wouldn't they, after some prominent individual has gone by the wayside, kind of try on for size another one by saying, I'm so-and-so. In other words, one of the ones they had worked with, why wouldn't that same force go to someone else and say, I'm Elvis. I'm Elvis, you know. I'll work with you. I'll work with you. And yet he wasn't Elvis. And even that force that worked with Elvis was probably working with a half a dozen others at least at the same time he was working with Elvis. So you don't know what all games he's playing. Another interesting thing I don't know if you want to think about it or not, but T and I have had kind of fun seeing how the globe is kind of broken down in sections, and there are so many characteristics of lower forces in certain areas that differ from lower forces in other areas, almost as if the angels of Lucifer are assigned to, or maybe not assigned, maybe confined to. Just like a jail has many cells. You don't know if the next level has by some means kept them in certain areas so that the influence is there's someone over the Bible Belt. You see what we're saying? Now there's someone over the you can take areas that have strong aspects about them that are very different than other areas, and almost see that influence uses the prominent people in the areas and almost could be responsible for what is even tended dialect and attitudes and major endeavors in people's lives in different areas of the world. It's going to be a lot of fun when you are able to get in a position where you can see how things actually were sorted out and handled here. If you ever get a chance to read this book.
Any more questions?
Brandon has questions.
Or how it works that he's taken like major powers like Russia and the United States, and he has them going against each other, and which destroys vehicles, which is his means of.
Why do you think Lucifer?
Well, that's what it was.
Why do you think Lucifer? What makes you think that wars are Lucifer's fault? Or negative? You don't know that. If you wanted to take that point of view, you could say that those people who were killed back in Moses' day, that Lord in that tent must have been the devil instead of the Lord. You don't know.
There's still wardens here.
Yes, and
Guards.
Lucifer, you're right, that for the most part, Lucifer does not want to lose plants, because he will take every plant he can get that will continue to be a faithful slave. But the next level, we believe, and this is a very delicate subject, but the next level, when they see plants aren't going to even be useful as a tool for the next level, that they're just waste, they might wipe out great sections of vehicles, just as the farmer would get rid of the burrs in certain parts of his farmland in order to clear the way for better plants. So we don't necessarily think that the doing away of plants is Lucifer's work.
Well, Lucifer
talk to those aims. Why has he waited 6,000 years, for example, to finally, like electricity's only been around for 100 years or so. In other words, he's reached dimensions. My own thought would be, well, the next level didn't permit it to happen until this particular time. They would push the buttons perhaps and then allow him to it.
That's true. He was very restricted, and he had to lay a lot of groundwork. You don't know what all had to be done in the years prior to this much information coming in.
I think Lucifer had the knowledge of electricity.
To do that kind of thing. He knew how to take it when that knowledge came in and to abuse it and to use it for his own means.
I think it was mostly, all of these comforts were mostly for us, I think, in Pure, so that we wouldn't have to walk in sandals.
I think that the chief knew that when this information came in, that he would continue to try to do his taking advantage of those elements and using them to his own aims. But he's even though he was a responsible person in the next level, he's very much under control as far as the chief is concerned. I mean, the chief knows exactly what to do with him and what not to do with him, and only permits him to exist in so long as he can still be of some service. And his presence here is being of service to you. And he even resents the fact that he is being used by the next level for positive means.
When Lucifer came here, he had a lot of knowledge that could get the garden going pretty good. And but he's been away from the next level for a long time, and a lot has happened. And he probably didn't have all that information to progress as far as he's progressed.
Wasn't available to him. Now, don't forget that he knows how to use the positive. He knows how to program computers. He knows the advantage of having computers or plants. I didn't mean machinery computers. I'm talking about plants. He knows how to use the positive to try to keep them satisfied. If you understand that, he doesn't want them to know that what they're into is ultimately negative. So he's programmed them very, very carefully to think that what they're into is positive, even their addictions to the planet. Now, things have gone awry a little bit because computers are waking up a little bit more, or the plants are waking up a little more at the time that next level is here also, and you all are putting out thoughts. And plants, just like we have told you, how they are picking up, these plants are still picking up on thoughts of, we better stop ruining our bodies so fast. We better stop, lay off the alcohol, lay off the tobacco more. And now we got to do something about this drug. It's getting out of control. You know, but even, let's take, there's an anti-aging outfit in Hollywood, Florida. I think you all have seen some literature, maybe some of you did, Astrologics. And they are tapping a lot of good information that's in the atmosphere toward extending the health of plants, of human vehicles, and but they're also tuned into. It's like Lucifer sees what they're doing, what they're tuning into, and so he has to get his 2 cents in. And his 2 cents in, like an article came out the other day on some drugs that you can take that can permit you to still smoke and drink and so forth, and it will block the negative response of those things to your vehicle, so that you can still take certain other drugs that will help your vehicle be healthier and last longer, and take certain drugs to block the destructive aspect. In other words, they're trying to get your cake and eat it too. Not be affected by it, but still still take them, not in the long run be affected by it. Now that just threw me when I read it, because it was such a clear indication of how the opposing forces were using that little school down there, or laboratory, whatever it is. Can you see that?
No questions.
I don't want to assume that this was Lucifer's work, we've kind of seen it before, but then what is the reason for the worldwide, or the programming, wherever it came from, for the female vehicle to be equal with the male vehicle when it wasn't that way for a long time? And this time it seems to be.
That's because T's here. Lucifer had so carefully programmed the hierarchy of almost everything to believe that the male vehicle was the house for anything special.
Should I tell him what the booger, what my booger has tried to pull on?
Oh, sure.
Said the Lord never talked to Eve, so why would the Lord speak to me?
I believe that the mind that is in T, or the one who gave instruction to the mind that is in T, really pulled a clever one by letting Lucifer go ahead and make this dominant male aspect, and then choosing a female vehicle to come in at this time, for the older member to be in a female vehicle. That was really keen, because it just threw Lucifer. It was just a shocker, and it was. He still can't believe it, and it's having its influence worldwide.
I keep thinking from Woolworth, he doesn't.
It doesn't really know how to handle things. I mean, he really doesn't, because he is so programmed to the male vehicle. He really just doesn't quite know how to handle it. That's the truth. No, it was initially a vehicle, just because, but Adam also was, but the mind came in it, and but Eve was, in order for when the Lord must have, when he saw what happened. Now we don't know if he knew before he brought him that this would be a likelihood. In other words, the chief might have thought initially, I believe I'm going to let Lucifer get into that garden, because if Adam is weak enough to fall under his presence, then it'll give me an opportunity to use it as a training ground to strengthen minds, and to even have them stoop to that level. And so the way to do that is, if that happens, which it did, and the Lord probably knew that the likelihood was very strong. If it didn't, if Adam hadn't fallen, then fine, Adam passed test, goes back, takes responsible job, and none of us put down, call Adam, or whatever you want, but all your history book is based on the one that fell, the one that gave in. You don't know how many were there before, or if there might not have been any there before. But the important thing is that since it happened, and since the vibration of the vehicle was soaring, then the Lord said, okay, here's a good opportunity to bring in a whole group and let them get their strength in this way. And the way to bring them in is as offsprings of Adam. But that's going to require that both polarities are going to require Adam and an Eve. So Eve had a mind the same as Adam, and so many of their offsprings did. Now, where that number ended, you don't know. So that plants began to be reproduced that were not houses, but plants. And also then Lucifer then began to have place to, or have plants to use, even ones that weren't occupied by primary minds. Can you see that? And how far that went will be very interesting to read the book on. But is this new to you?
Yes.
Because I thought we had implied this in the other tape too, but maybe not. But see, I think if you listen to those tapes, again, you'll see this in there. But maybe we didn't make it clear enough. But there's a lot in there that we're not sure. Well, you'll just miss it on the first few times because you won't. We don't know, believe it or not, a lot of times how to zero down. Even T and I have trouble. When T has received something or I've received something, we have to go over it and over it and over it because we think that. Now, we don't always. Sometimes we can just drop a drop and the whole thing just immediately blossoms. And the other one sees the whole picture when you can't imagine how the other one even sees the picture because they haven't done anything but drop a drop. But then at other times, because we might have had so much contrary programming in that specific area, we will have to go over every little detail again and again and again to get it all sorted out, to try to clean up the tapes of the vehicles. And that's what you're trying to do as you re-listen to tapes and as we help you with this. Ready?
Great instances for, let's say, a fellow who started it, and again, he's close to death, but he doesn't die, but in the interim period where he's almost dead, he says, well, here I was 10 feet above the table, and I was watching the doctors put on my chest and all this kind of business. But then he relates that after he didn't die and is awake to other people, he says, I was up there, I saw myself. Would that be like programming is being done, something like that?
No, I thought we answered this sometime.
Well, you related that the person who was dying and who did die could play tapes of meeting family and all that kind of business, but never was cleared up actually seeing myself.
Well, this is brought in by, this is part of what T told you earlier about how this reincarnation thing expands. When in those interviews, I believe when they were getting started, the first time that people were interviewing people who were telling of their near-death experience or whatever you want to call it, when they were legally dead and then came back to life, and probably the question was, could you see your vehicle? You know, and you could. Were you up above it? Were you in the room? Could you look down upon it? And believe it or not, I don't believe that any have given accounts that jibed with other accounts who had not also heard of other accounts.
And sometimes it could be
of that type of information. Now, other type of information, which was just computer information coming out, you could see how it would jive. Do you see what I'm saying?
And it could be just the mind, you know,
Of the vehicle.
like this soul travel. The souls don't really travel. The mind projects. And that's what they say, you know. And again, you have a good imagination there. If that individual has just a tiny little parcel of a brain or something like that, it could actually project in that way. It's just like a picture show, so to speak. You know, whatever they believe, or if they don't believe, or whatever's been programmed in the genes, could actually react in that way, or have a reaction that way. We don't feel like the mind or the person actually left the body. You know what I'm saying? I know.
Except maybe as a mind trip.
Right.
It's like you know that you can learn to concentrate on something else so much that you can be unaware of pain that's being inflicted
You can
upon you,
actually
because you
project.
can keep your mind someplace else, and mentally you're keeping it someplace else. And if you are beginning to be conscious of the fact that your vehicle is fading away, the remnant of that mind can choose to see it in a different way. And then when that person comes back into better control, he's going to see what he saw. He's going to remember what he saw under those conditions of wondering, what in the world is happening to me? I'm about to fade. You see what we're saying?
There are a lot of questions, a lot of things that I feel like in the process of our trying to explain, we're having to battle with what all of you all, plus ourselves, have been programmed to believe that the vehicles are possible to do.
Yes, I believe like the forces are coming in with some of these questions to try to shoot us down.
Like it doesn't.
And we don't know the answer to those.
We don't know.
We're
All
just
we know
guessing.
is what we gave you.
And we have researched that enough even to override our boogers that are trying to tell us that, you know, this is enough to know that information was not correct.
Now, you are in vehicles that are very, that are capable of doing many, many things. We do not have all the answers to those, even the body and mind travel and all that stuff. We do know that that's a lot of Lucifer's tricks. And whether, when you have questions like this come in, don't pursue them, because it isn't necessary. Now, when the time comes, when we get the answers to these things, we have been talking logically, because we knew about all these things, but we only accepted the information that was given to us at face value. And then we tried to translate it down to what they do, and put it in a way that you all can understand. But it didn't dawn on us to say, what about mind health? What about some of these bodies of some of the questions? In other words, when you are in a position like we are in, you can't come up with that somebody can give you. The main thing is that the information that you receive can be taken at face value, which would discount a lot of these little things. But this is
the funny thing is that if you have watched how this has worked through us through the years, it ought to be quite a bit proof to you what's going on with these tools and the ones who help these tools, because we give you what we're given, and after we give it to you, these questions all come up, and they all are answered, and they aren't answered before we give it to you. And if you can understand that ought to tell you a whole lot about the way information is given to us and the trust we have in it, and how accurate it is on piano roll. Now, we may get out of here and find that 90% of the information we have given to you has been inaccurate and has done the job, and we don't care. But we know that it has been accurate for the piano roll. That's the important thing. It has done exactly what the piano roll was before at that stage. And how literally or logically accurate it is. Your beavers aren't even capable of knowing next level logic. You're still plugged into Lucifer logic. And when you try to analyze the things that we give to you, you're analyzing them according to his rules. You don't know what logic is.
If you try to make all the pieces fit according to what Lucifer has, they won't fit.
That's right.
And we stumble around and try to come up with answers.
Yeah, that's
and they don't even make sense to me.
Let's take X, for example. Take Eckankar. You know that there is one of Lucifer's helpers working with Eckankar, and he has identified it, labeled it carefully, has colored it as a way of thinking. Now these people in Eckankar, they meditate or they go to sleep, and while they're asleep, they go to a place, and it's called heck. And it's distant from this place. And while they're there, they do this, and they see the place and all this. But can you not see that if I choose to be an act, if I choose to join that organization, and I read their literature, and I put myself in a meditative state or go to sleep, I am choosing to be a radio receiver of that angel of Lucifer who is identifying himself as Ek, and he's going to give me the pictures that jive with all the others who have chosen to be a part of that. Can you not see that? So therefore, all those little plants who call themselves members of Eckankar have labeled themselves as little slaves to that one servant, who the only reason he has labeled them that way is because he is trying to do his thing in that way. And it's colored a little different from the helper, the angel down the street, who has a different trip. And they're all just little copies and facsimiles and ways of getting control of things. It's like corralling a bunch of animals and teaching them certain language, in order to perform certain tricks. But another animal trainer who comes along who doesn't know your lingo, and those animals aren't going to perform for you. They weren't taught by him. They don't know his lingo. They probably could perform the same things that the other ones could perform, but only if they use the same lingo and even the same tone of voice and so forth down the line. And you can see how this would work with plants and the forces that control them.
Even the things that I respond to,
What do you all get to say? What did you see of there? And Bobby and all other guys were staring at what Jim was talking, I guess, because they're relating so much to the same thing. And to me, what is so neat is how he has them all trained, or not just he, but the different helpers, have them all trained as what they really are, is independent, not brainwashed at all. And the one thing they're guarding themselves against is being brainwashed. and that they have a mind of their own, and the last thing they would ever do is be a robot.
I had this book that came out, we mentioned it to you a long time ago, about God drives a flying saucer. And towards the end of it, they talked about how if this was so, if God did manipulate them from the heavens and so on, then all they were nothing but puppets. And, he almost got hostile towards the end of the book. And
Yes, it started out real good.
And then the more he thought about it, the madder he got.
It's like he had a visitor who came and said, well, look, if that's so, then you're just nothing but a puppet.
Now, we're talking about this garden, right? So keep it separate from another created garden. And some of the things that happen on another created garden may be entirely different, and they may leave their body on another garden. You know what we're saying? Like if they die or something, the next level draws to them or something like that. Because this setup on this garden is entirely different from the created garden, where they have
Lucifer's tried to copy
right.
other gardens and tried to program them
plants to think in the ways that he knows were true one of the gardens.
Now, when you have questions that come up, and I'm glad you asked that, Magona, because I feel like you all have got to stay on the truck with this information. In other words, you can start believing that everything that happens really happens, when actually it's only a facsimile of the real thing that happens. No real thing can happen here, like what happens in another garden. They can't even reproduce in the same way that they do it on other gardens, where it wasn't instigated by the superimposed slate. And what you want to do is, when you start having questions about, well, what about this? And then you present it to us, and we got to come up with an answer. Then we've got to remember to say, we don't believe it. We don't believe that it is happening. And you've got to say, well, that it must not happen here before you even present the question to us. Because every time you present the question to us that we don't have the answer for, then in somebody's mind in this class, all of this just doesn't jive.
Starts adding fire
See
to
what
their
I'm saying?
booger.
And then that builds the force against us that we have to, eventually we have to come back and say, oh, just stop it. You know, stop asking these questions, because they don't apply on this garden. It isn't real. It's not, it's just like the world out there. It's not the real creative garden like it's supposed to be. It's a facsimile. You all are in a pretended state, so to speak.
You know, we got the, and the funny
You
thing
can
is, we got
understand
the information. I'll let you in on a secret,
Me too.
because it was unimportant. But we actually, in New Mexico, when you all first came to that little state park, or wherever it was in the forest, for a little retreat from Amarillo, you know what we're talking about? When you first came there is when we first got the information that discarnates weren't running around, and that we were off base about the idea of minds as we had thought in reincarnation and discarnates running around influenced like they were. And we didn't know what to do with it, because our computers just really had trouble with it. And but it wasn't important enough. I feel like they just kind of threw that at us to kind of prepare us for this time, so that we would be more receptive to the information that came.
Actually, we didn't get enough of the information.
No, but I'm saying that little ingredient was thrown in, and we didn't know what to do with it, and yet we still knew that it was right. But we couldn't fit the pieces together enough, certainly, to talk to you all about, because we didn't even know what to do with it in our own conversation. But now we can see that it was preparing us for this, so that we would be more receptive to us. But this information did not come easy to us this time. It was difficult for us to accept it and digest it.
We had to go through all the things. Of course, we didn't go into that, but we went through a lot of other things that doesn't apply, I think.
But the funny thing was, when we go through that, we're not trying to shoot it down in the same way, because all it took was a tiny little look at those aspects to recognize that whole volumes of what we thought we had understood could just drop away. And that's very strange when that happens. And one day you'll enjoy seeing that kind of thing happen if you work in this kind of task, particularly.
I'm looking forward to what the real truth is.
Because all we're really getting is a piano roll of things that is getting you to a certain place, and preparing you, your strength and your
your mentality.
Once the questions come in and it doesn't fit into what we told you, then you just say that doesn't matter, so drop it. And because until you learn how Lucifer works, then you can be enthused by it, right?
Well, say, don't drop the subject, though. Just drop the questioning. And know that it does fit in.
Okay.
Yeah, know that it does fit in. Woody?
Showing us, you took just a few of the types of wall, like chamber, where all these glass and columns and crystal, beautiful things to look at. And then you closed it, you took us outside the chamber, closed the door. And then there was some more things to show us on the outside of that. And each time you took us through a door, you said, can't let you see more. And at the time I was having a dream, I was thinking about things inside the chamber you hadn't shown us yet. And then we had missed somehow. Maybe you would take us back in time. It wasn't until now, until we were talking tonight, that I realized that there are other exterior chambers than the ones that are within that show us. There's new information that you brought us, like a shell around all of the previous information that we received. And yet I know that the questions I have now, I can't answer because my perspective isn't broad enough yet to see the shells around all of them.
You haven't backed off from it far enough yet. That's good, Alan. Pretty good. That make a bit of sense. There's down the key.
I'm looking forward to more questions I can answer.
Until when the truth really comes in.
I could be wrong, but it seems like there's a thought that you give some information then there would be an update to see what kind of cancel or help, but then there'd be another update that they both thought it was
That happens a lot.
over and over.
As reinstated, I can't remember right now, but Thea and I talked only today about how the new information has reinstated a lot of information that we previously had canceled because of certain piano notes on the piano.
I wanted to ask about one thing.
55 years old.
I thought that you said that some of the legends of the Greek people being taken out had something to do with it, but then I didn't think about it. But that this possibly be another kind of actually
No. We feel very strongly that your class is here at this time. And how long you've been here, we don't know. Because our task and our conscious awareness, which you started not too long ago.
Could be that you just came into the audience and listened to incarnation. We don't. Really
Or
doesn't
in
matter.
these vehicles, not in these vehicles. See, we still use wrong terminology
Yeah.
in this lifetime.
I don't know here when you were the other, but it seems like maybe there still could have been here because you studied some information that you first gave us, and then it was updated.
Right, it's possible. Like we thought, that's right, because we thought way back when you were first intense, and we were talking to you that you were the same ones that were students of Jesus 2,000 years ago. That may or may not be true. He might have brought a class in, a small class in, and did that with them, and when they finished the lesson plan of that class, which might have ended with their own martyrdom, that might have been the end of it for them.
because we see that there are a lot of questions we couldn't answer in that kind of speculation, like numbers. So we really don't know. And when we get back on the spacecraft, we'll probably know all these things very, very quickly. And we might know a lot of these things right before we leave. We don't know, because we know so much more now than we did a while back. We might understand that we may not.
Said about myself, go there. That I can't think of hardly anything humans has had as powerful of a settling effect on me from the world. Because it's like all of a sudden I feel like I'm just on a desert island with a very special, with my family or my group of survivors from, but outside that is just a world of mannequins. I saw a Twilight Zone once where this girl ended up on the 11th floor of an elevator and all the mannequins were alive. Gosh, what a horrible experience. I can't even imagine what danced in my clarinet.
Well, when Dee and I go into town on tasks, I sense this information. The distance between us and them is so much greater than it has ever been before, and our whole attitude toward them is different, and you have to kind of treat them in a way that gives you the least trouble, and that's all you're really concerned with.
The only thing I care about is getting out of here and going towards
That's right.
you a lot.
Okay, but see, these talks like this information that we have on these tapes, and these piano roll understandings are like brain food. Okay, they're kind of cake and icing and things like that. Because the real thing, you said you're so eager to get back, and we're so eager to get back, and we're eager for you to get back. And none of this stuff on these tapes, none of these understandings that we have shared with you are as important as what we were talking to before we turned the tape on tonight. And that is raising the standard level of your performance, of being ahead of having forethought, of being responsible for everything that goes on, of applying the instructions that we have given you as thoroughly as you can possibly apply them, and to do it as a team, and with each individual on that team trying as an individual to do the very best performance they can do. That's what's going to get us back there. None of this information is going to get us back there. This is just gravy. This is just.
It counts. It's true.
It does give you satisfaction, and gives you it helps you, like you mentioned a moment ago, like Dan Soda mentioned, it helps him in his mental separating from other plans. But the important thing is getting our performance right. It's getting our control, still getting your plan to be a perfect display, and have your mind so filled with the perfect instructions that you're performing as a mental. That's what's going to be special.
I'm going to deal with it totally different. I've been trying to think in my mind how, and I was wondering if my thinking was correct. You think that those humans are positive and stuff that 50%.
It's a part of their programming.
And that way, that's how that can help.
Absolutely. But be aware that there's that other 50% there, and they all have it. And the odds usually aren't in our favor. Go ahead.
The way I'm look at it,
As programmed plans.
I guess my problem is I'm gonna have a harder time motivating. Well, I'm gonna switch my gears. I don't know.
I think it'll make it easier for you. You wait and see. I think it'll make it easier.
Don't try to figure out how you just take one little thing at a time. And you want to treat them with respect because after all, you would treat a little puppy dog with respect, right? And in a sense, they're like little pets. And our children are, we don't want to put them down.
No, and it's a pretty masterful computer. Don't forget that even though it has a lot of negative side to it and has been a slave to a degree of the forces of this planet, but look, the mechanism itself is a very admirable
But
mechanism.
let's say, like one individual just recently went out to task and became aware of the female vehicle. Okay, now, in my mind, they should have gotten hysterical if they became turned on by the
Because
female
they
vehicle.
should have said,
You know,
"No,
that's
look
like,
what
this tape recorder really turns me on, you know, I'm so drawn to it.
letting this vehicle or letting my booger play a tape that some other plant is going to turn this plant on that I don't even have vibrating on that level of ignorance,
You see what-
because that level doesn't exist. It's a level of ignorance. It's playing games that don't even exist. They're just games that were thought up by Lucifer and his forces in order to make better slaves of the planets here. Can you not see that? They don't even exist.
Junodi and Cerroti probably will have the worst time in Hippody because they have computers. They're more real than the humans.
They're going to probably walk up to the humans and wonder why they don't respond when you push a button. And
In other words,
but humans usually do respond if you know which buttons to push.
Now,
That's
if you understand this information that was given to us completely, then there isn't a human out there in that world that could turn you on.
And if your plant is if your booger or you're permitting your plant to respond in that plant-like way for that moment, it ought to be very easy for you to quickly turn and say, "Cut! What in the world are you doing?" Talking to your plant, you know. You're under my control, and you're not going to act in this stupid way. I mean, can you not see that?
The fact of it is, it doesn't. It's only an illusion. It's like
It doesn't even exist.
a
I don't even
mirage.
know if you know what we mean when we're saying it, but it doesn't exist. These addictions of this planet that are Lucifer's heroin, they don't exist any more than the hallucinations of heroin are real. They are simply hallucinations. They do not exist. And the things that keep the plants at a lower vibration so that they can be better slaves, such as sensuality and drugs and all these other things that cause them to react in such lustful or anger ways, they are merely drugs that produce a hallucination. Even humans have begun to wise up to the fact that they don't exist. Even humans can turn now to their mate and say, "How can you say you love me when you treat me the way you do? The only reason you're saying it is because you want to go get in bed with me. And when we get out of bed, you can't possibly say it, or you wouldn't treat me." You see what I'm? Their computers are wising up to the fallacies of their program. Can you not see that?
if you all, when we first gave you this tape, this information, and put it on tape, and we said to listen to it over and over again, we didn't want you just to listen to that information. We wanted it to become ingrained in you, so much so that you could begin to see the reality of what we were talking about.
That's right.
In other words, it is hard to grasp it, to fully understand it. Otherwise, you would not, until you fully understand it, you will not really know how to treat the humans, the little robots that are running out there. In other words, let's take you. You have a problem. You have an out-of-crack task. You have a problem of being aware of the male or the female beings, depending on whatever sex you are. And if you now, after learning this information or hearing this information, you haven't fully pushed through your little Christmas enough to understand the information totally, but you begin to think in a different way, right? And so, let's say you're a female and a male comes in, and if he had a vehicle that could have turned you on, or you were attracted to at one time. Your plant could have been attracted to him at one time. Now, what you want to do is stop thinking in that way. You begin to look at, you see that vehicle, and there is a petunia, and you always loved petunias. Or there's a rose, and you always loved roses, or liked roses. But you don't want to go and taste of that, or touch it, or become involved in that petunia or rose. In other words, you are looking at it more objectively. If every person that comes in, like let's say a mother and a father and 3 children come into where Pamela works, and she sees them from where she's working. Now, does she look at them, oh, look at that family, aren't they nice, and look how well behaved those children are, and then, oh, look at that father, how nice he is to his mother, and you don't think in those terms. You look at them for what they are. Poor family. Here they're caught in the clutches of that horrible old Lucifer. Or what have you. But you don't let any of their characteristics reach you. Once you let them reach you, then you are influenced by them, and you can't help but be affected by them. You can understand it.
I've got another good analogy of what T was talking about, and that is Lucifer has carefully programmed all the plants at the human level of being computers to feel like they are components that they can function only if they're plugged into other components. In other words, humans, it's like a male and female being plugged in to each other, and they work as a unit. They might have little side units that they go out and play with once in a while, have affairs with others that they hide from their main component. But they're still like 2 components that are programmed to believe they work plugged in together, and that if they're not plugged in, that there's something greatly missing. Or if they're a family unit and they're really programmed very, very carefully to that, then there's a whole group of components that go, and it extends on down to grandparents and grandchildren, and all that group of components, and they all have to constantly keep alive with each other because they work only as a cluster. Now, not one of you all need for your perfect function another component, but you have learned the proper meaning of that component by check partners. You have learned the proper meaning of that cluster by a crew. Can you see that? Because that's the real meaning of the 2 or the several. It's like the check partners and the crew. Can you understand that? And if you would think of it that way, and see that they're translating that down to such a base, hideous level, to think they physically have to be plugged into each other. And that's the reason they still have to clutch at each other. And that clutching so easily can even turn into incest. Because that's the level of their dependency upon each other. And yours is at a completely different level. It's one of check, partner, and group. And I don't know if that helps you any, but it would give me a way of thinking at it, so that if my plant had a response in that way, I would have very good immediate ammunition to see how the plant or the booger was trying to make the plant still respond at such a base animal level to think in terms of that kind of response.
The other day when the last crew over to get their pants, we bought a lot of other things. Well, we got a big pile of things on the counter. And the girl at the checkout said, what are you going to do with it? And that struck me as being so funny, because what do you do with clothes? You know. And I thought...
She said, oh, you're buying all your Christmas presents.
Yeah. And we said no. And, but it struck me as being funny. Here that plant was talking to me. You know, that's
and was
how
curious
it
about my activity.
And it struck me as being funny, you know, because all of a sudden I realized that Petunia was talking to me.
That's right.
You know, not that I was so about her, but it was...
But you were. That's the point.
But it was, here, she knows how to talk to me, you know.
Her questions don't fit because she doesn't know me. She exists at Petunia level. Can you understand that? So she can only talk Petunia talk. And that's, those must all be Christmas presents. What are you going to do with those?
We go to the grocery store when we used to buy all these things, you know, and what are you going to do with all these cake mixes? You know? Now it strikes us as being funny because that was the level she was on, and of course it just satisfied her to think, well, we're going to make one big cake, you know. And
now this is really good if you can get what Tia's saying, because if you can see their conversation with you as completely inappropriate, and what you have to do is figure out how to not let them know that their conversation is completely inappropriate. You have to kind of say the thing that they might kind of expect to hear, just so that their curiosity won't extend beyond that point.
And if you see a good-looking dame in a tight outfit, you know, with rounded hips and all, you can look at that as if to think, isn't that a funny-looking dude in there? Over there, you know. And in other words, it's the program that they all have, and each one has their own little way of saying things. Little kids running around, you know, picking up different things that they want, you know, space capsule or Yoda or E.T. or whatever it is that they see. They all are just little nothings, you know, that are running around with nothing in their brain other than what they see happen.
What's been programmed.
In other words, this is what we want you to push through to realize. Don't accept this information and say, boy, I can see on television, like was mentioned, how the people are, but how are you going to respond when you meet them face to face? How are you going to accept them in that way? You'll be tested when you go out on the surface, because you can put into practice what you have learned. And if you are influenced by them, become aware that you were influenced by them. And say, boy, was I influenced by that good-looking dame over there, you know. And then try to see it for what it is. We don't mean go and meet one, or really get into it, but just analyze it in your own mind what happened, so that you will, the next time you go and you're confronted with that, you will know exactly how to program it or to
See it more objectively.
Or have it compute in your brain. Can you see what we're saying?
You've got to see what their programming is. You've got to recognize it as programming, and that is what they have tuned into. And that just because you're walking around in a house that looks similar to their house, or a plant that looks similar to their plant, they can't help but talk to you in their same computer language that they have talked to. But you're in such a different place that when, just like T said, when you hear their computers speaking, and what is so funny is how computers are now speaking. Computers in the cars are speaking, and computers in the children's mathematics are speaking. The telephone operators there's a robot on the other end when they're giving you numbers to refer to the new number and thing. There's no person there giving you that.
The copies are making copies.
And these little and if you could see that very objectively and get out of the programming of your plant that still sees it in the labels that it used to see it in, and you apply these new labels to it, it should really help you soar.
And you don't want to give forces that are working through individuals any attention. In other words, your weakness is you're going to be attracted to, and the forces are going to try to make it more attractive to you. And it's going to make you have more difficulty overcoming the weakness that you have. But once you are talking to yourself, so to speak, and saying, well, that's really just a facsimile, it doesn't really exist, it's some influence, and they're trying to influence me so that I will fall, or whatever it is that will happen to me.
And get control over your plant better, because your plant is a genetic structure that is programmed to respond to other genetic structures. But that doesn't mean that the other it's just like back in the human world when you knew that somebody could be attracted to someone else, but they weren't attracted to them. But their being attracted to one person was the genetic programming of that particular vehicle, which was programmed to respond in that hookup way with that kind of thing, even though that one may not be genetically programmed to respond in that way. So anytime you recognize your plant putting off those signals, you've got to see it for what it is. And just immediately call a halt to it. And you shouldn't even get serious about it, because you should see it just for what it is. Paper dolls, you're taking paper dolls serious?
Those things, on the outside and all that, and I guess I don't know how to identify the feelings that I have, or even if it is a feeling, that perception humans have, because in one sense I feel sort of sorry for them because they aren't going to become something. They aren't.
Oh, but you can't judge them
No,
by knowledge.
no.
Well,
They won't get to go where you're going.
Well, what I mean is that the concept I had of mind occupying going on to further incarnation.
Okay, but look at it this way. Because just as you used to apply it to reincarnation, apply it to the genetic structure of that vehicle. And we feel very strongly that the next level might come in here and turn all these vehicles around. The ones that are worth turning around.
Well, maybe that's.
And see, you used to apply that to mines. Well, now apply that to vehicles. And what could be greater than for those vehicles to be turned around and to reverse the course that they had taken?
Well, that's the Pinocchio closet.
That's right. That's
Counting
right.
on it in the back. Today, there was a spider calling from the counter. And I know that before you told us that, well, you know, when you see a mosquito or a bug or something, just swat it and you'll accelerate it. I always have difficulty with that instruction. Something always bothered me about it. And now I know what it was. It's because, in a sense, that's the last time around for that particular structure. And it was the structure that I was identifying as.
Well, see, the tree, right?
Sure.
And if you kill the little spider or the mosquito, you haven't killed the mosquito tree.
Right. And kill the tree.
No, and you really haven't done any damage. You've just knocked the leaf off.
Well, all the same, I put the spider outside.
So it can come back in.
No, I got 3 of them if you didn't do it.
But can you see what we're saying? It's actually knocking, it's just like even back when the Lord and Moses, they knocked off a whole bunch of leaves called human leaves. He didn't mess anything up.
Sure.
He didn't,
Flatten a lot of
those
things
were
up.
just a bunch of leaves that needed to fall off the branch because they weren't making a good thing. I don't know if you can
Right.
understand.
Actually, it was just an experiment.
Well, it is.
That's right.
That's what I was saying. On the one hand, I think it's just my gift for wanting to feel sympathy, but it's not real. Because on the other hand, when I'm looking at it as like a computer, my own computer short circuits a little bit because it thinks of itself as, well, I'm a computer too. You almost hear my computer statement. I'm a computer. You're brilliant, yes, but you have something extra. You're plugged into wattage, your voltage. The other one's not plugged in. And